Good morning, friends, and welcome to worship at St. Andrew. I'm Justin Bullis, the Director of Production and the Online Worship Experience, and it is my privilege, as always, to welcome you today. We are so grateful that you've chosen to join us here on our YouTube channel. Welcome to this sacred online space where you are invited, included, and valued as a vital and beloved member of our worshiping community. Please take a moment to check in at gostandrew.com/sign-in to let us know that you're here. We'd also love to know where or when you're joining us, and by filling out the online form, you can share any prayer concerns with us or ask any questions you may have about our church. If you would like to explore deeper engagement with the work God is doing in and through the St. Andrew community, you can email us directly at connect@gostandrew.com. We'd love to hear from you. As Reverend Mark reminds us every week, St. Andrew is an open, affirming, inclusive congregation that welcomes saints and sinners, believers and skeptics, the lost and the found, the wanderers and the wanderers, families of all shapes and sizes, and people from every point along life's journey. No matter who you are or where you've been, no matter what you believe or even if you believe anything at all, you are welcome here and you belong here. And now please enjoy the third sermon in Rev Mark's current preaching series, Swimming Against the Tide, 7 Social Practices That Can Save the World.
Now it happened as they went, that he entered a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she approached him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore tell her to help me." And Jesus answered and said to her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things, but one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part, which will not be taken away from her."
The movie City Slickers captured the longing spirit of an entire generation in the early 1990s. It's about an unhappy Manhattan yuppie on the verge of turning 40 and how he's roped into vacationing with 2 middle-aged friends on a cattle drive in the Southwest. The trio pays big money to live the cowboy life, helping a team of ranchers drive cattle from New Mexico to Colorado, all while trying to navigate their own personal midlife crises. Along the way, they meet up with the ill-tempered, intimidating trail boss named Curly, that stereotypical tough and crusty cowboy who teaches them not only how to be real cowboys, but how to be real humans. In one memorable scene, Curly is riding alongside Mitch, one of the City Slickers, when their conversation turns suddenly existential. Mitch looks at Curly and asks him if his life makes sense to him. And Curly replies, "You city folk, you worry a lot. You all come up here about the same age, you spend 50 weeks getting knots in your rope, and you think 2 weeks up here will untie them for you. None of you get it." Curly pauses and says, "You know what the secret to life is?" "One thing," says Curly, holding up one finger. "Just one thing. You stick to that, and everything else don't mean nothing." "That's great," says Mitch. "But what's the one thing?" And Curly gives him a long stare and says, "That's what you've got to figure out." What's the one thing? It's what we'd all like to figure out, isn't it? The secret of life, the meaning of life. Who among us cannot relate to the plight of Mitch and his friends, buried by the endless routines and toils of their lives, longing for something more meaningful? We leave little margin in our lives for finding and making meaning. We rush from activity to activity, from moment to moment, caught between distractions and daydreams. And from dusk till dawn, every second of downtime can be so filled with diversions and drudgeries that we often fall into bed at night unsure of what we even accomplished in any given day. City Slickers was a prophetic film for its day. In the 1980s, diverse forces conspired to speed up the pace of modern life. Fax machines, pagers, cell phones, they all made people available in ways they'd never been available before. Women had entered the workforce in droves. Traditional gender roles and responsibilities suddenly changed. The cultural zeitgeist shifted to this celebration of individualism, where having it all and doing it all became the new aspiration. At the time, futurist Faith Popcorn noted that Americans were quickly feeling overloaded, overwhelmed, and overstressed. 80% of Americans said they were looking for ways to simplify their lives. The pace of life was just too fast. Our time just too stretched. Our roles just too many. And this societal schizophrenia gave birth to the cultural trend that Popcorn came to call 99 lives. Popcorn predicted that time would become the new money, and that we'd be willing to spend money on products if it meant that we could buy back more time. 99 Lives is about searching for mechanisms to recover personal time and avoid overscheduling. It allows us to do more in less time. Today we call it streamlining, multitasking, even life hacking. Because there's not enough time in the day, we begin to look for efficiencies. This 99 Lives trend gave us some amazing innovations in the 80s. Microwavable foods like Hot Pockets, Le Menu, and Lego My Ego. Food on the go like Go-Gurt, because apparently some parents just didn't even have enough time to give their kids a spoon. Dr. Pepper gum, because who has enough time to drink and chew gum at once? VCRs, books on tape, ATM machines that dispensed not only cash, but stamps, light rail passes, and movie tickets. Today, that trend has given us things like DoorDash, HelloFresh, Instacart, and same-day denture delivery. You can even buy a car from a vending machine and have it delivered to your driveway by tomorrow. Why? Because we only have so much time, right? And we have all these things that we want to do before we run out of it. Jesus wasn't a big fan of multitasking, streamlining, or life hacking. He knew how it would invariably lead to exhaustion, emptiness, even enslavement. What I think are the three chronic conditions of modern life. Exhaustion. Do you ever feel tired all the time? Like you can't keep up with the pace? Like you're overloaded and worn out? Emptiness. Do you ever say, I just don't have anything left to give? I'm stretched to the limit. I've given so much to others that the well is dry and I'm running on empty. Enslavement. Does it ever feel like you're stuck? Like you're running in circles, trapped in some loop that keeps repeating over and over? Exhaustion, emptiness, enslavement, these are the evidence of a deep spiritual struggle that speaks of loss of meaning, balance, groundedness. It's rarely easy for us to spot it when it happens to us, but we can all spot it when it happens to others. And that's why we're given this wonderful story in Luke about Mary and Martha. A story that shows us what it looks like when we've lost sight of what matters most. Jesus stops by the home of Martha and Mary for dinner one evening. Jesus is an extraordinary guest in the home of rather ordinary people. Martha sees this as an opportunity to pull out the best china, to chill the Chardonnay, to kick on all four burners and do the full-scale Martha Stewart routine. This meal will be a labor of love. So she cooks the meal, sets the table, cleans the kitchen, washes the dishes. Mary, on the other hand, never leaves the table. She sits at Jesus' feet all night, listening to his every word, oblivious to Martha's plight in the kitchen. Martha seems to be overworked, underappreciated, exhausted, frustrated, grumpy, empty, trapped, while Mary appears to be something more like a Christian Dalai Lama, the portrait of contentment and peace. So predictably, Martha finally snaps. Elbow deep in soap suds, a scowling look of resentment on her face, she says, "Jesus, don't you care that my sister has abandoned the kitchen to me? Tell her to help me." Can you see it? Martha waving her wooden spoon around, standing at the kitchen doorway in her apron and a hairnet, glaring at her freeloading sister. And that's when we say, poor Martha. This is what it looks like when we don't focus on Jesus and we worry about the wrong things. But before we make Martha into a caricature, remember, she's simply doing what was expected of any first century Jewish woman, entertaining and feeding her guests, offering hospitality, serving Jesus in the only way she really knows how. And by all the cultural expectations of the day, her sister Mary is not. And yet Jesus says, "Martha, you're all worked up over nothing. Only one thing is essential, and Mary has chosen it." Well, that's the punchline of the story. But like the city slicker Mitch, we say, that's great, but what's the one thing? It's easy to say that Mary's choice to sit at Jesus' feet all night was better than Martha's choice to work in the kitchen all night, although given the choice, I'd much prefer sitting to doing the dishes. Was Jesus suggesting Martha's work wasn't important? That if only she were less busy, like Mary, she'd be happier? Maybe. But I think the deeper truth here is not what Mary and Martha chose to do, but how they chose to do it. There's a time to go and do, and there's a time to stop and listen, a time to cause and a time to pause. And knowing which and when is a matter of spiritual discernment. If we were to ask Jesus who we are supposed to be, Mary or Martha, I bet his answer would probably be yes. Martha's problem is not that she's working too hard. Her problem is that she doesn't know in that moment what her true work really is. Does that sound familiar? There are times in our lives when fulfilling our necessary roles and meeting the expectations of others who are counting on us can be a beautiful expression of following the will of God. We are all Martha to some extent. Martha, in fact, makes the world go round. The world wouldn't spin without the Marthas of the world. She's the one who changes diapers or repairs the air conditioner when the fuses blow. She's the one that does the grocery shopping or changes the oil every 3,000 miles. Martha makes the world go round. Her work isn't glamorous. It's often overlooked and unnoticed. And yet, where would we be without Martha? She's all around us, and we at times are her. For all of us, there are common tasks that must be completed in our lives, some of which give us meaning, a lot of which just feel like drudgery, but all of which, when we do them, constitute acts of deep love and faithfulness. In the midst of a busy life, however, we need to cultivate the spirit of Mary within us too. That desire and permission to sit in stillness and silence, to pause and hear the word of life, the whisper of grace, without which our lives are meaningless, without which our work leads only to exhaustion, emptiness, and enslavement. Maybe what both Curly and Jesus know about the secret of life is this: we can't be in two places at once. Mary's attention seems to be undivided. She appears to be fully present in the moment. Martha, on the other hand, seems so torn, as if she's trying to be in two places at once and not fully present in either. The writer Bob Benson wrote about his custom of never going to bed without kissing his kids, whether they were awake or asleep. And one night he bent over and kissed his son Patrick on the cheek and quickly stood up to leave the room. He was tired. He was in a rush to get to bed. But his son's question stopped him cold and brought him back to his bedside. His son said, "Dad, why do you kiss me so fast?" Why do we often allow the most meaningful moments of our lives to go by so fast? In search of 99 lives, we forget to live the one we're living in the here and now. It's like that old Radiohead song that goes, "Sometimes I get overcharged. That's when you see sparks. They ask me where the heck I'm going at 1,000 feet per second. Hey man, slow down. Slow down." One of the myths of life and love in the modern world is that it's not quantity but quality. That's a lie. It's an excuse for not showing up and being fully present in the moment. If we really believed that it's not about quantity but quality, we'd have no problem whatsoever going to work on Monday and telling our boss that we'd like to put in a few less hours at the same pay. Because, look, it's the quality of our work and not the quantity that counts. We know that's not quality time. We call that part-time. The one thing Jesus is trying to teach Martha is that life and love are comprised of two kinds of time. A time to work and a time to make a difference, and then a time to pause, to reflect on what kind of difference we're making in the world. The great pianist Arthur Schnabel once said, "The notes I handle no better than many pianists, but the pauses between the notes, that is where the art resides." It's all music. The work, the rest, the quantity, the quality, it's all part of the beauty. Writer Kate Daniels describes a typical evening in her home. Maybe you can relate. She and her husband come home from work. The kids are trying to do their homework, but are mostly squabbling while she prepares a meal. The dog overturns the kitchen garbage can and runs away, leaving garbagey paw prints all over the house. And she says at the end of the day, each family member is tired and overstimulated. She knows in her heart that each is seeking love and healing and nourishment. But all too often, weariness and frustration, irritation boil to the surface, and family conversation is bitter and sharp rather than gentle and kind. Try as I may, Daniels writes, I have a hard time browning the ground turkey I'm planning to mix with my canned spaghetti sauce, all for the glory of God. But she adds, I try to find the poetry that exists even here. It's all poetry. It's all music. It's all beauty. Only one thing is essential, says Jesus. I think what he meant was that one thing is to find beauty in the toil of life. Kathleen Norris, the great writer, wrote about the endless struggle of caring for her sick husband who was battling cancer. There was a lot of worry and drudgery in caring for him through his cancer treatments. But she said she also encountered peace and goodness, even joy in it all. Nestling in front of the TV and laughing themselves silly watching reruns of Bugs Bunny cartoons, or the goodness they found in so many of the doctors and nurses, the aides who found many small ways to offer them kindness, or the joy that came when she remembered to be grateful for the sheer wonder of life itself, the beauty of creation, the miracle of her marriage, the love of family and friends. And she wrote this: "My Christian religion is not about sweetness and light and unattainable holiness. It gets down to the nitty-gritty. The Jesus I encounter in the Scriptures is the same one I find in the daily newspaper, on the street, in my home, in my low and high moments, and even in my place of drudgery. And when I recognize who it is that is with me in all the busyness of life, I do feel myself, my weak, weary, and withered self, to be every bit as rich as a queen." Our takeaways for today: we can never be in two places at once. The music resides in the pauses between the notes. Only one thing is essential: to find beauty in the toil.
The I'm graduating.
My name is TJ Dubler. I'm graduating this week from Arapahoe High School along with my friends Ian and Charlie. From middle school through high school, St. Andrew has exposed me to real-life hardships faced by others and what grace looks like. It began with middle school trips for Meals on Wheels. I was invited by my friends to join the fun, and I decided to give it a chance. It didn't take long for me to realize that it was an opportunity to help others in need. I hadn't known how hard it is for some to gain access to a meal, and this was a pivotal moment for me when it comes to learning empathy. Later, I realized the value of relationships when I started attending Clifton Ministries' weekly evening small group. I learned how to hold an honest conversation and could communicate my true feelings. These conversations gave me valuable life skills of communication, knowing yourself, and building relationships. My best memory through St. Andrew was my mission trip to Houston in the summer of 2020 to help recovery from hurricane and frost damage. This was humanity at its core, people helping each other. We all learned so much about God on that trip, and this church is so much fun that it even made a 16-hour bus ride slightly tolerable. In the fall, I'll be attending Montana State University to study architecture with a minor in fine art.
I'm Ian McCall, and I'll be majoring in environmental engineering also at Montana State. I really appreciate all the opportunities through St. Andrew to talk with people who come from a very similar life situation to mine, and those who live a much different life than I have. I've learned that even though people come from all walks of life, we are connected through our faith. St. Andrews has helped us learn all about spirituality, find a place for God in our hearts, make connections, and build relationships that can last a lifetime.
My name is Charlie Farr, and I plan to study mechanical engineering also at Montana State. St. Andrew has brought me a sense of community and belonging, and the same is true for friends I've introduced to the church through its activities. This incredibly welcoming congregation has helped me feel at home, like this is somewhere I've wanted to be while growing up. Our congratulations and best wishes to the class of 2022.
This guy.
And now, as you return to the rhythms and routines of your busy lives this week, I leave you with this lovely poem, which can also be used as an alternative setting to the hymn, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. Come away from rush and hurry to the stillness of God's peace. From our vain ambitions' worry, come to Christ to find release. Come away from noise and clamor, life's demands and frenzied pace. Come to join the people gathered, here to seek and find God's face.